There's a kind of afternoon that the very busy never quite have. Not because they can't sit still, some of the busiest people sit still just fine, but because sitting still for them has always felt like something to get through on the way to the next thing, like a rest stop rather than a destination. John Wayne understood those afternoons, eventually. John Wayne, born Marion Morrison in Winterset, Iowa in 1907, spent most of his professional life in motion. More than 170 films across 5 decades. Western after Western, war film after war film. A catalog of American masculinity that shaped how an entire generation of men thought about strength, loyalty, and what it meant to endure. He was not, by most accounts, a man who sat still comfortably in the middle years. There was always another project, another location, another reason to keep moving. But in the final years of his life, after the cancer diagnosis that came in the mid-1970s, after it became clear that the body which had carried him through so many demanding roles was not going to cooperate indefinitely, something in John Wayne's relationship to time shifted. Not suddenly and not dramatically, but gradually, the way light shifts in the late afternoon. He began to notice things he had moved too fast to notice before. The particular quality of mornings at his home in Newport Beach, with the light coming off the water. The conversations that happened when there was no particular agenda. The things his grandchildren said when no one was performing for them. Those who were close to him in those final years described a man who was, in many ways, more present than he had been at the height of his fame, not less himself, still unmistakably John Wayne in the qualities that had always defined him, but more available, more attentive to what was immediately in front of him, less obviously elsewhere in his mind while his body occupied the room. He talked in some of those final conversations about what he thought of looking back, what he valued about the life he had lived, and what he would have done differently. He didn't talk much about the films. He talked about the people, about the mornings he wished he'd stayed home for, and the evenings he'd left early because there was somewhere else to be. About the conversations that hadn't quite happened because he'd been in too much of a hurry. About ordinary afternoons, the ones that looked like nothing from the outside, and that he understood, only later, to have been exactly what mattered. He said, in one of those conversations, that he wished he had understood earlier how fast it all went. Not as a cliché, everyone knows time passes, but as an actual felt understanding, one that changes how you treat the ordinary Tuesday, that makes you look up from whatever you're doing and actually see the room you're in, the people in it, the particular, unrepeatable quality of this specific moment. Maybe you've begun to feel that too. Maybe there are moments in your current life, ordinary moments, nothing particular moments, that you've started to notice differently, with more attention, with more something that could be called gratitude, even if it doesn't present itself with that word attached. Just a sense of, this is good. This ordinary thing happening right now is actually good. I should not miss it. That noticing, that small act of actually being present for the ordinary thing rather than looking past it toward the next thing, is one of the most valuable things a person can practice. Not because it stops time. It doesn't. But because it makes the time that passes more real, more genuinely experienced, rather than half-noticed on the way to somewhere else. Most people, asked to remember the best moments of their lives, don't describe the landmark events, not the official occasions, not the highlights the world would have photographed. They describe something small, a particular afternoon with a person they loved, a specific conversation that surprised them, a moment when the light was exactly right and everyone was exactly there, and something about it registered as this. This is what a good life is made of. Those moments are happening right now in your life, or they will be this week. The question is only whether you're paying enough attention to notice them when they come. John Wayne played men who were always moving, who had some place to be, a problem to solve, a danger to confront. And in his own final years, the thing he valued most was finally, and for the first time, just being somewhere. Just being at home, in the light off the water, with the people he loved, with nothing pressing that couldn't wait. He had learned, late but genuinely, what that was worth. You don't have to learn it late. If you're watching this tonight, the opportunity to practice it is already here, already present in the fabric of your ordinary days. The morning cup of coffee before the day starts, the backyard on a warm evening, the grandchild showing you something small they found, the conversation that doesn't go anywhere in particular, but that feels, somehow, complete. These are the moments that accumulate over a life into the thing you most value when you look back. Not the landmarks, not the achievements. The ordinary afternoons lived with some degree of actual presence. Noticed, appreciated, genuinely experienced rather than hurried through. John Wayne's last years were, by many accounts, among his best, not because things were going well, necessarily, but because he had finally slowed down enough to be present for what was actually there. The light, the people, the quiet, the unremarkable, irreplaceable texture of an ordinary afternoon at home. If you're watching this tonight, that afternoon is available to you. Maybe even today. Maybe even right now. The only question is whether you'll notice it's there. So take a slow breath. And maybe, this week, let yourself fully arrive into one ordinary moment. Not because something spectacular is happening, just because it's happening. And you are here for it. That's exactly what John Wayne said he wished he'd done sooner. And it's always available. There is one more thing worth considering, the question of why we so often fail to be present for the ordinary moments, even when we know intellectually that they matter. It's not usually laziness. It's not usually indifference. It's almost always something else, a habit of mind that is always slightly ahead of the present moment, always moving toward the next thing, always carrying an invisible to-do list that makes the right now feel like the waiting room for what comes next. John Wayne was a man of action, by nature and by profession. His whole career was built on the energy of movement, of always having somewhere to be, something at stake, a direction to move in with conviction. That energy served him enormously well for most of his life. It was, in many ways, who he was. But it also meant that the capacity for pure presence, for being fully in a moment that didn't require anything, had to be learned, or perhaps relearned, in the years when forward motion became less available. Many people make a version of this discovery. Retirement, illness, or simply the slowing of life's pace creates, for the first time in decades, space in which there is nothing that absolutely must be done right now. And that space, which sounds like a gift, can initially feel disorienting, empty, like something important is missing. And the impulse is to fill it, to find new tasks, new projects, new reasons to keep moving. But sometimes the space itself is the point. The emptiness, if you can let yourself stay in it, rather than immediately filling it, has something in it. A quality of awareness, of noticing, of being in contact with the immediate texture of your life in a way that constant motion never quite permits. The light off the water that John Wayne started noticing in his final years, that light had always been there. He just hadn't been slow enough to see it. The conversations with his grandchildren that he found so valuable, those had been available all along. But he'd been in too much of a hurry to be fully in them. Nothing changed in the world around him. Something changed in the quality of his attention. That quality of attention, the ability to be fully present for what is actually happening, rather than half present while already moving toward what's next, is not a gift that some people have and others don't. It is a practice. And like any practice, it improves with use. The more you notice ordinary moments, the more you deliberately look up from what you're doing and see what's actually there, the more readily the noticing happens, and the less it requires effort. Maybe this week is the week to begin that practice, or to deepen it if you've already started. Not a meditation retreat or a structured program. Nothing that formal is required. Just once or twice this week, when you're in the middle of something ordinary, stopping, looking around at what's there, letting the moment be what it is rather than what it needs to become, and registering, even briefly, that this, right here, right now, is the actual content of your life. The afternoons are going to pass either way. Only question is whether you'll be present for them. John Wayne, in his final years, was, and by all accounts, those were among the best afternoons of his life. So take a slow breath. And maybe, this week, let yourself fully arrive into one ordinary moment. Not because something spectacular is happening, just because it's happening, and you are here for it. That's everything.